In a previous video, we learned how to deal with word problems that contained unit prices, or questions where you were told things like apples cost 30 cents each, or a store sells DVDs for $11 per DVD, or something like that. So we learned how to make a table that keeps track of the prices per item, the quantity bought, and the total price, total money spent or total money earned. This is known as the PQT table, or price, quantity, and total table. And in this question, in this video, we'll go over a variation on those PQT questions, word problems where we can use this same table, price, quantity, and total table, although it's not necessarily a unit price question. So let's read this first question, and then we'll see how it's different from the normal PQT question and how to set it up. So the question goes, all the students in a certain class agreed to buy their professor a $120 gift. If all the students contribute equally, then each student will have to contribute $3. But if X students decide not to contribute, each of the remaining students will have to contribute $4. What is X? So here we don't have, there's no unit prices. What we have is a total cost. In this case, it's $120 for a gift that is shared equally. So the keyword here is contribute equally. The students contribute equally. In these types of questions where you have maybe a restaurant bill that a bunch of people are splitting equally, or some other sort of cost that a bunch of people are splitting equally, we can use the same table, the price, quantity, total table. And the way we'll do that is, well, first we'll set up the table. So we have PQT, price, quantity, total, and I'll make a couple of rows. Originally, what we have is all the students. So all the students agree to buy their professor a $120 gift. The total is $120. All of the students contribute equally. Then each student will have to contribute $3. The $3 is the what we put in the price. That's the unit price. It's in fact the share per person. So that's 3. And we can then use the table to figure out how many students there are. So if there's $120 total that needs to be collected to pay for the gift, and everybody's chipping in $3, 120 divided by 3 is 40. So remember, on this table, we know that price times quantity equals total, but you can also read it in this direction, where if you divide the total by the quantity, you get the price. Or sometimes you can divide the total by the price to get the quantity. And the point here is that we are able to figure out pretty quickly that there's 40 students in the class. The question then goes, if X students decide not to contribute, each of the remaining students will have to contribute $4. So this is sort of the new situation. We have a the baseline situation, and then what happens if there's a slight alteration. Well, the gift still costs $120, but now we have everybody's price, because some people drop out. The price per person, the share per person that everybody needs to chip in, goes up to $4. And here we can figure out then, if everybody's paying $4 and we need to pay for a $120 gift, 120 divided by 4 is 30. And so what we have is 30 people that are going to pay for this gift. The question is, what is X? And X is the number of students that drop out. So if X students decide not to contribute, well, if initially 40 people were going to contribute and then it went down to 30, X is 40 minus 30, or 10. So the answer to this first question is 10. Just to recap, we've made the same table. Even though it's not a unit price question, we're not given some sort of commodity or item that we're buying 10 apples at 70 cents each, or again 30 DVDs at $11 each. What we're doing instead is we are sharing a cost among a number of people, and we can use the same table. So let's take a look at the second question, which is a little bit more complicated, and see how we can do that using the same table. So let me erase this. Let me just clear this up. And let's take a look at this question. So 20 friends decide to go on vacation to a lake house for a month, and to evenly split the monthly rent, which is N dollars. However, 4 friends drop out of the vacation and only 16 wind up going. If the remaining friends still split the rent equally, how many more dollars would each of them wind up paying in terms of N? We can use the table again here. So price, quantity, total. And the reason we can use the table is because even though it's not a unit price question, we are splitting a cost evenly among people. And it's the same concept as before. It's the same sort of structure as before in that we have an original setup, an original situation where we have 20 friends. So that's, we'll put 20 over here. And these 20, so when in these types of questions where you're splitting a cost among people, the number of people is the quantity. Uh, and the monthly rent is $1. So we're splitting N. Now, however, 4 friends drop out and only 16 wind up going. So these remaining friends will still split the rent equally. So again, we now have 16. So this is the new situation. We have 16 people that are still splitting N. How many more dollars will each of them wind up paying in terms of N? We can do this algebraically, but in general, if you see variables in the answer choices, it's easier to pick. It's easier to do the question by picking a number for the variable or for an unknown that if you knew what that unknown was, the question would be a lot simpler. In this case, it's the total. So let's pretend, for example, that the monthly rent is $160. I'm picking $160 because 160 is divisible both by 20 and by 16. In other words, if the rent was 160, if the rent were 160, 20 people could split that evenly and 16 people could split that evenly. So I'm picking an easy number, even though it's not a realistic one. So you don't have to pick realistic numbers. So 160 divided by 20 is 8, which means that the initial or original situation, when there were 20 people and the rent was 160, everybody would have paid $8 per person for the rent. However, the rent stays the same, but 4 people drop out, there's now 16. If the rent is 160, then divided by 16 is 10. The price per person or the share per person is 10 bucks. So the question is, how many more dollars will each of them wind up paying? Well, they were paying $8 initially, and now they're paying 10, so 10 minus 8 is equal to 2. So the answer is 2. We're looking for an answer choice that says 2, but none of them say 2. They all have n in them. What we have to do is take this number that we picked for n and plug it into the answer choices. So A is going to be 160 over 160, which is 1. We're looking for 2, so that's out. B is 3 times 160 over 400. We can reduce that. 3 times 16 is, well, actually we can reduce the 16 and 40 by 4. So that becomes 16 divided by 4 is 4, 40 divided by 4 is 10. So this becomes 12 over 10, or 1.2. And we want 2, so that's out as well. What I'm doing here is I'm just plugging in 160 for n, because that's what I did initially to make the math easier. And then seeing which of the answer choices is going to give me 2. I'm looking for 2, because that was the answer we got. C is n over 120 over 160 over 120, 16 over 12. We can again divide this top and bottom by 4, reduce by 4, so this becomes 4 over 3. That's not 2 either. N is 160 over 80, and that is the same as 16 over 8, which is 2. So this is probably the correct answer, but when you're plugging numbers in other words, when there's variables in the answer choices, and you're picking something for that variable, working through it, and then plugging it back in, you have to test all the answer choices. E is going to be 7 times 160 over 50. We can cross out the zeros, so we have 7 times 16 over 5. Now this is not going to give us 2, because it's not going to give us an integer. 7 times 16, 5 does not go into 7 or 16, so we're going to wind up with a fraction. But to work through it, just to show you some mental math, 7 times 16, 7 times 10 is 70, 7 times 6 is 42. 70 plus 42 is 112. So now we have 112 divided by 5. And when you're dividing by 5, you can multiply top and bottom by 2. This gives you 224 over 10. The reason we did that was because now it's easier to divide by 10. When you're dividing by 10, you just knock out a 10 and move the decimal over. So this becomes 22.4. So E is definitely out because it's not 2. It's way too big. And the answer is D. So to recap, when you have questions where you're splitting a cost evenly, sharing a cost evenly, you can set up this table, this price, quantity, and total table. Just put the total cost in the total, and the number of people is in the quantity. The price is the share per person.